The voicemail lasted 43 seconds and it ended my marriage. Not the whole message, just one line buried near the middle, between the sound of wind and a car door closing. My husband's voice, low and close, saying, "She won't find it." I moved everything to the storage unit on Kellner Road. He called the wrong number. He meant to call his brother. He called me instead. I listened to it 3 times standing in our kitchen, still holding the spatula I'd been using to flip pancakes. The pan started smoking. I turned off the burner. I set down the spatula. I pressed play again. My name is Rowan. I'm 31 years old, and until that Sunday morning in March, I thought I had a pretty good life. Not perfect. My husband, who I'll call by what he was to me, my husband, had been distant for about 8 months. I'd chalked it up to his job. He was a commercial real estate broker, and the market had been brutal. He worked late. He was tired. He forgot my birthday, but made up for it with flowers and dinner at the kind of restaurant where they refill your water without being asked. I told myself that was love, maintenance love, the kind that doesn't look romantic from the outside but keeps things running. We'd been together 7 years, married for 4. No kids yet, though we'd talked about it. I was a nurse practitioner at an urgent care clinic on the north side of Columbus, Ohio. I worked 36 hours a week, 3 12-hour shifts, which meant on my 4 days off I was usually the one handling the house. Groceries, dry cleaning, scheduling the HVAC service, remembering when the water filter needed to be changed. My husband earned more than me and worked more hours, so I told myself the division made sense. I didn't question it the way I probably should have. The storage unit on Kellner Road was 8 minutes from our house. I knew the street. There was a public storage facility there, beige and orange, the kind of place you drive past 1,000 times without thinking about. I'd driven past it on the way to Target. I had no idea my husband had a unit there. He'd never mentioned it. We didn't own that much stuff. We lived in a 3-bedroom house with a finished basement and a 2-car garage. There was no reason to rent outside storage, unless you needed to store something you didn't want your wife to find. I put on shoes. I didn't change out of my pajamas. I just got in my car and drove. I told myself I was probably overreacting, that it was probably tools, or old furniture from before we got married, or something boring and explainable that he hadn't mentioned because it wasn't worth mentioning. I told myself that all the way down Kellner Road, right up until I pulled into the public storage lot and sat in my car and thought, but then why did he say she won't find it? She. Not it. Not the stuff. She. My hands were steady when I got out of the car. I don't know why. They should have been shaking. I walked to the office and asked the woman at the front desk if I could get into a unit under my husband's name. She asked if I was on the account. I said I wasn't sure, gave her my name, gave her our home address. She typed. She looked up. "You're listed as an authorized user," she said. "He forgot to take me off. Or he never thought I'd come here." She gave me the unit number and the access code. I walked back out into the gray March morning, past rows of orange roll-up doors, counting numbers. Unit 247. I found it near the back of the facility, along the far wall, partially in shadow, even though it was barely 10 a.m. I punched in the code. The lock released with a click that felt very loud. I lifted the door. Inside, lined up against the left wall, were 6 identical gray plastic storage bins, the kind with snap-on lids you get at the container store. On the right side, a card table and a folding chair. On the table, a laptop, a portable phone charger, and a thick manila envelope. Above the table, taped to the wall, was a calendar, not a decorative one, a planning calendar, with dates circled and notes I couldn't read from where I was standing. I walked to the calendar first. One date was circled in red marker, about 6 weeks out, April 28th. Next to it, in his handwriting, confirmed transfer complete. 2 weeks before that, final signature. A week before that, close secondary. I didn't know what any of it meant yet, but I photographed all of it. Then I opened the manila envelope. It took me a long time to understand what I was looking at. The documents were dense, financial pages, account statements, what appeared to be transfer records. But the name on most of them wasn't my husband's. It was a variation of it. A middle name I didn't know he used professionally. An LLC I had never heard of registered in Delaware. And threaded through all of it, in amounts that made my vision blur, was money. Our money. Moving out of accounts I didn't know existed, into ones I couldn't trace. He wasn't just hiding something. He was building a way to disappear. I sat down on the folding chair and read everything twice. My clinical brain, the part that stays calm when a patient is coding, took over. I started sorting. What was dated? what was signed, what referenced accounts I recognized from our joint finances, and what didn't. I took photographs of every page with my phone, 61 photos before I was done. Then I put everything back exactly the way I found it, closed the lid on the envelope, left the laptop untouched. I lowered the door, heard the lock click shut behind me. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I turned on the radio because silence felt dangerous. Some Sunday morning talk show about gardening. A woman explaining the right soil mixture for raised beds. I listened to the whole segment. When I got home, my husband's car was in the driveway. He was up. The pancakes were still on the counter, cold, the pan still sitting on the stove with a faint smoke smell in the air. He was at the kitchen table with his coffee, looking at his phone, and when I walked in, he glanced up and said, "You went out." "Pharmacy," I said. "Ran low on Tylenol. You could have asked me to grab some." "It's fine, you were sleeping." He nodded and looked back down at his phone. I put my keys on the hook by the door. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at the tile floor for a long time. The version of my life I thought I was living had just become a different story, and I was the only one who knew it yet. That was March 15th. I want to be clear about something. I did not confront him that day. I did not confront him the next day or the day after that. I know that surprises people when I tell them. They assume the natural thing is to go downstairs and throw his coffee in his face and demand answers. But I've worked in healthcare for almost a decade. I know what happens when you reveal information before you understand it. You give the other person a chance to manage you, to explain, to minimize, to rearrange the facts into a shape that benefits them. I wasn't going to give him that. Instead, I called my sister. My sister is 10 years older than me. She's a paralegal, not a lawyer, but she knows people. She's also the kind of person who does not panic, who hears bad news, and immediately starts thinking about what to do next. I drove to her house on my next day off and sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. I showed her the photographs. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "You need a forensic accountant and a family law attorney." In that order. She had a name for both. The attorney's name was Ms. Larkin. She had an office in a building downtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and coffee. And she had the kind of presence that makes you feel like things are more manageable than they were 15 minutes ago. I told her what I'd found. I showed her the photos. She looked through them carefully, asked several questions I couldn't fully answer, and said she would need to refer me to a financial specialist who worked with cases like this. "Cases like what?" I asked. "Cases where one spouse has been systematically concealing assets," she said. "This isn't small. Whoever set this up put real effort into it." Real effort. I kept thinking about that phrase afterward. My husband had put real effort into hiding this from me. How long? I didn't know yet. Long enough to incorporate an LLC. Long enough to open accounts I'd never heard of. Long enough to rent a storage unit 8 minutes from our house and never once mention it. Long enough to have a plan for April 28th. The forensic accountant was a man named Mr. Osei, who worked out of a quieter office in a suburb east of Columbus. He was thorough in a way that was almost comforting. He asked for everything I had access to, and I mean everything. Tax returns, joint account statements, the mortgage, my husband's disclosed earnings, his company's public filings. He was going to build a picture of what our finances actually looked like versus what my husband had let me see. It took 10 days. During those 10 days, I lived inside my marriage like an actor who has memorized every line but is waiting for the curtain call. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I sat beside him on the couch and watched television. I laughed when he said something funny. I was very good at this because I realized I had been doing a version of it for months without knowing it, performing a contentment I didn't quite feel in a marriage that had gone quiet in ways I'd learned to ignore. The difference now was that I knew what the silence was about. One evening he came home earlier than usual, which he almost never did, and I wasn't ready for it. I'd been on the phone with Ms. Larkin's office, sitting in the car in the garage, and I'd had to end the call quickly when I heard his car pulling in. I got out and he looked at me, and for just a second there was something in his expression, a flicker of attention that felt different from his usual distracted glance. "Who were you on the phone with?" he asked. "My mom," I said. He accepted it. But that night at dinner he was quieter than usual. He kept looking at me in this way I couldn't read, not warm, not cold. Evaluating. He was suspicious. Not of what I'd actually found, but of something. A change in pressure maybe. The way you can feel a storm coming before you see the clouds. I called Mr. O.C. the next morning. How close are we? I asked. I need 4 more days, he said. Can you do it in 2? He paused. I'll try. That Friday, I had lunch with my sister at a place we both like, a diner near her office, and she slid a folder across the table without saying anything. Inside was Mr. O.C.'s preliminary report. I read it over my soup and my grilled cheese, and I kept my face very still. The number I didn't know about was significant, substantial enough that it represented more than half of what we should have had as a couple had the money been disclosed. It had been moved in increments over a period of approximately 26 months. More than 2 years. He'd started 3 months after we got back from our anniversary trip to Asheville. I thought about that trip. We'd rented a cabin, we'd hiked to a waterfall, he'd held my hand on the way down. He'd already started by then. Okay, I said to my sister. Okay, what? Okay, let's finish it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand once. She didn't say anything else, she didn't need to. Here's what I did not do. I did not go home and blow everything up. I did not pack a bag dramatically, or change the locks, or send him an email with the word fraud in the subject line. Here's what I did do. I filed, quietly. On a Tuesday morning when he was in a meeting across town, Miss Larkin filed the divorce petition and a motion to freeze the jointly held assets pending financial discovery. At the same time, we submitted a formal complaint to the Ohio Division of Securities regarding the undisclosed LLC and the transfer records, along with everything Mr. O.C. had documented. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, my husband's phone was probably already ringing. He called me at 2:47. I was in the parking lot of the clinic between patients. What did you do? He said. His voice was very controlled, very careful. I filed for divorce, I said. A silence. The storage unit, he said. Not a question. The storage unit, I confirmed. Another silence, longer this time. Rowan, don't, I said. You don't need to explain anything to me right now. Your attorney can talk to mine. I hung up. And then I sat in my car and finally, after 32 days of holding it together, I let myself cry. Not the heaving kind of crying, not the kind that makes your chest hurt. Just quiet tears that ran down my face while I looked out at the parking lot and the strip mall across the street and the totally ordinary Tuesday afternoon that had no idea what had just happened. I gave myself 4 minutes. Then I blew my nose, checked my face in the mirror, and went back inside to see my patients. The next few weeks were, I will not pretend otherwise, hard. Not in the dramatic way. There was no screaming, no showing up unannounced, no scorched earth confrontation. My husband vacated the house within a week, at Ms. Larkin's insistence. I stayed. I kept going to work. I kept functioning. But there were nights when I'd walk into our bedroom and feel the absence in the room like a physical thing, like pressure behind my sternum, and I'd have to sit down until it passed. I'd also be lying if I said there weren't moments of doubt. Not doubt about what he'd done. The documents were very clear on that. But doubt about whether I'd missed signs I should have caught earlier. Whether I'd been naive, whether the life I thought I was living had been a performance for years and I'd just been the audience. My therapist, who I started seeing during that period, pointed out that this was a form of misplaced responsibility. He hid it from you deliberately, she said. That's not naivety on your part. That's deception on his. She was right. I know she was right. Some days I believed it. The legal process moved. Discovery produced more documents. The LLC was dissolved under regulatory pressure. A portion of the transferred assets were recoverable, not all of them but enough to matter. The April 28th date, the one circled in red on the calendar in the storage unit, turned out to be the closing date on a property he'd been purchasing under the LLC, in a city I'd never been to, in a state where no one knew us. He wasn't planning to leave loudly. He was planning to just quietly stop being married to me, financially speaking, and let me figure it out after the fact. I want to say something about that, about the nature of what he was doing. It wasn't passion. There wasn't another woman, at least. The investigation didn't find evidence of one, and at a certain point I stopped needing to know. This was colder than that. This was a person who had decided that his future would not include me, and who had spent 26 months methodically ensuring that when he left, he would take the money with him and leave me standing in a house with a mortgage and a life I'd built for both of us. He never thought I'd look. He never thought I'd go to Kellner Road. He definitely never thought that when I found the calendar with the red circle, I would photograph it, walk out calmly, and spend the next 32 days building a case while passing him the salad dressing at dinner. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. It was not the settlement he'd planned. The disclosed assets, the recoverable transfers, and the terms Ms. Larkin negotiated meant that I was able to stay in the house, pay off the remaining mortgage, and keep my financial footing. I'm not going to pretend it was a perfect outcome. Some of the money was gone. Some of it stayed gone, but I was standing, and he wasn't. I changed the water filter in January. It's one of those small tasks that used to feel like evidence of how much of the house I managed alone, and now it's just a thing I do. I get the reminder on my phone and I do it. My sister came over for dinner last month. We sat at the kitchen table with wine and takeout Thai food, and she looked around the house, my house now, just mine, and said, "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "He forgot you were on the storage unit account." I thought about that for a second. "Yeah," I said. "That's what got him," she said. "He spent 2.5 years planning, and he forgot one form." I smiled. "He always said I handled all the paperwork." She laughed. "I did too. He wasn't wrong about that part. I did handle the paperwork. I handled all of it, including, as it turned out, the paperwork that ended him. I'm not angry anymore. I want to be precise about that. I'm not performing serenity, and I'm not telling you I've forgiven him in some clean, cinematic way. What I'm telling you is that the anger ran out. It took about 5 months, and it just ran out like a tank going to empty, and what was left underneath wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I know who I am now in a way I didn't before March 15th. I know what I'm capable of. I know that I can sit across the table from a person I love and not show a single thing on my face while my world is splitting apart behind my eyes. I know that I am, when it matters, a person who does not flinch. I also know that I will never again be the kind of person who ignores a quiet marriage and calls it maintenance love. The next relationship I'm in, if there is one, when there is one, the paperwork is going to be equal. The financial accounts are going to be transparent. The storage units, if any, are going to be discussed. And if my name is ever on an access list again, I'm going to make sure I remember to use it before I'm 31 years old and standing in a beige parking lot on a cold Sunday morning, finding out who I married.